Israel Update with Gadi Tao and Mike Duran. Hello and welcome to a special edition of Tablet's Israel Update. Yihya Sinwar, as you must know by now, has been killed by the IDF, and there's also been an attempt on Benjamin Netanyahu's life. A drone hit his Caesarea private residence. We summoned the director of the Center for Peace and Security in the Middle East, especially on a Saturday for this occasion. His name is Dr. Mike Duran, and he sits in our Washington bureau. Hello, Mike.
Hi, Gadi. This is our headquarters.
Headquarters.
I don't know why. Why do I have to correct you every time? And, I'm starting to feel like you make this mistake on purpose.
I'm trying to shift our image in a more serious direction.
Oh, I thought you were trying to move the headquarters. I thought it was a power play.
You thought it was a power grab. Yeah. Well, it is called Israel Update, Mike. You know, it's not called USA Update.
We're updating Americans about Israel from the headquarters.
Well, we'll talk about that later. So we wanted a few remarks in this special edition about what it means and about whether we can or cannot be happy. Mike and I just discussed an Israeli cartoon, which is condescending towards all those who think we shouldn't be happy when someone dies, basically.
You should show the cartoon. Can we show the cartoon?
Can we show the cartoon? Well, it's so difficult to explain it, isn't it? It took you speak Hebrew, and it took a while. So it's from my Facebook, and this is the cartoon, and this guy who's with his back to us is quoting a phrase from the Bible, which says, "When your enemies fall, do not rejoice." And Batman is slapping him in the mid-sentence and saying, "Baklawa now." And baklawa is this Arab sweet pastry that they distribute whenever they're happy that someone died. Many, by the way, distribute baklawa for Sinwar's death in the Arab world, as they did for Nasrallah. But the whole cartoon is directed against the sanctimonious mood in which moral grandstanding eclipses the basic instinct of survival, not just the sense of humor. So I think we definitely should rejoice that a person like Yihya Sinwar, who is an ideologue of a Nazi worldview and the perpetrator of October 7, it is indeed a happy occasion that he has died. But Mike, so we decided to just have a few comments on this and what it would mean going forward. But you said you also have a news bulletin, so we'll go back to our usual habit and start with the headlines.
Yeah, just a few headlines. Of course, you've already mentioned that on Wednesday, the Yihya Sinwar was killed by a unit of trainee squad commanders who encountered him by chance while on an operation in southern Gaza. Prime Minister Netanyahu, after the killing of Sinwar, put out a message to Gazans in which he said, "Whoever sets aside their weapons and returns our hostages, we will allow him to leave and live." But he warned that anyone who harmed Israeli hostages would pay with their lives. I thought that was a very interesting and important statement, Gadi. We'll talk about it more in a minute. Mm-hmm. This morning, also, as you already mentioned, a Hezbollah drone hit Netanyahu's Caesarea home. The drone was one of three, and it's the same kind of drone, I believe, which got through last week to the Israeli base just south of Haifa near Benyamina. Prime Minister Netanyahu and his wife were not present at the time of the attack. In addition to that, nearly 200 Hezbollah rockets were fired in northern Israel this morning. This is Saturday morning. 10 were wounded and one was killed. The one who was killed was in a residential block in Haifa. Finally, Gadi, President Trump, he's out on the campaign trail from Michigan. He said that Prime Minister Netanyahu is doing a good job, but Biden is trying to hold him back and probably should be doing the exact opposite. We note that that is the same theme the final news item, of course, is that I have an article in the Wall Street Journal. That should have been top of the news, and it argued the same as President Trump.
Yeah, we'll get into that argument, because obviously on everybody's mind is what now. And immediately we had a statement by the president. President Biden put out a statement which was full of a boilerplate compliments. And also, strangely, he took credit for the intelligence that led to the assassination of Yahya Sinwar. And that's a funny thing to do, because if you remember, when we were about to enter Rafah, the United States threatened to withhold 2,000-pound bombs from us, but also said that if we refrained from going into Rafah, the United States would share with us intelligence leading to Sinwar's capture, or possibly leading to the capture of heads of Hamas. And so by that logic, apparently, we went into Rafah, so they did not share the intelligence that he is now boasting of having shared. And we basically did it on our own. And then at the end of the statement, and this is the most important topic for us, I think, this Saturday noon your time, probably, or morning your time, afternoon my time, is that Biden is, of course, trying to leverage the assassination of Sinwar to end the war. It's another version of take the win, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. The Americans are playing from the same playbook that they've always been playing from. The problem they have, though, is that the world has moved on, and they don't have. First of all, who's negotiating on the Hamas side? It's a real who's the leader. Who's the leader who can actually deliver on any commitment that's made? It's entirely unclear that there is such a person, and this is why I made a point of.
I should just mention, just so to make your remark clear, that Biden wants a ceasefire. So we have to negotiate a ceasefire with somebody, and there's no one to do that.
So sorry. The American policy all along has been that a ceasefire in Gaza will be extended. The goal, the American goal, which they have been pretty open about explicitly, was to get a temporary ceasefire that could be extended into a permanent ceasefire, and that permanent ceasefire in Gaza would lead to a permanent ceasefire in Lebanon as well, but also a ceasefire by the Houthis against international shipping. So the entire region would be stabilized by getting the ceasefire in Gaza. They put pressure on Israel all along to show restraint so that they could then create the conditions for a deal with Hamas. But what they never got, they put public pressure on Israel all the time, but the Americans never got the Hamas to sign on to anything. So now they're saying to themselves, well, if Sinwar is gone, now we can get Hamas to sign on. But there's nobody at the top of Hamas who can do the negotiating. Or there are people who can negotiate, but can they deliver? Because there are two leaders of Hamas outside of of Gaza, but their connection to the people who are holding the hostages on the ground is really not clear.
And this is a time to say that all along we could not have been certain where the hostages are and who is holding them. And a few experts here said we're all talking about a deal that it's not clear even that a centralized Hamas can deliver, because maybe some of the hostages, as we know, were placed in the hands of private families. God knows what happened to their neighborhood or where they went. Some are in the hands of Islamic Jihad. Hamas itself, even before the fragmentation of the leadership, has been physically fragmented by the incursions of the IDF. So it was never clear that there was anybody able to deliver a reliable commitment about the hostages. You may remember that the International Red Cross was never allowed any access to them, so nobody knows for sure even who is alive and who isn't. So the tactic that Netanyahu is now pursuing, and that emerged even before he spoke. I remember because I was sitting a Channel 14 panel just after this was announced, and we were waiting for the prime minister's remarks, and the pundits said immediately, now is the time to put this proposal on the table. Either you hand us your hostages in wherever you are, whoever you are, you're no longer afraid of Sinwar, so you better be afraid of us, or you hand us the hostages and get your life in return, or we will find you and kill you. And some suggested also a pecuniary reward, say someone threw $1 million or whatever for a hostage. But clearly, this in the absence of Sinwar, as your piece in the Wall Street Journal notes, we now have to deal with or it's easier to deal with smaller portions of Hamas instead of dealing with a staunch ideological recalcitrant leadership.
Yeah, and centralized organization. A lot of people are suggesting, and it makes sense to me, that Hamas is going to fragment into different organizations. One analysis I saw from this dissident Shiite cleric who has been making a lot of predictions that have been very interesting about what's going to happen.
Oh, I know who you mean. The guy who said Sinwar's days are numbered. No, not Sinwar. Nasrallah's days are numbered.
Nasrallah. So he's saying that the organization will split into two. One led by Khalil al-Hayya, who tilts toward Tehran, and the other one, Khalid Meshal, who tilts toward Ankara. And this makes a lot of sense to me. I think the more and more, I don't want to overstate this analysis or this picture because we do have the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and they matter. But more and more, I think the Middle East is going to be split between Ankara and Tehran. We already see that
Turkey and Iran.
Right. We already see that increasingly in Iraq, especially the Kurds in northern Iraq. They're split between the Barzanis and the Talibanis. The Talibanis tilt toward Tehran. The Barzanis tilt toward Ankara. It wouldn't surprise me if the Hamas element of the Palestinians goes the same way. The job of the Israelis in that case is to sever as much as possible the connection between the outside leadership and the local leadership, which is what I think they're in the process of doing, and that's why I highlighted Netanyahu's offer in the news bulletin, because what he's saying is we're going to negotiate with the local commanders on an individual basis rather than that. The implication of what he's saying is we're going to negotiate with the local commanders rather than with the top guys.
And it would be a very different world if this indeed is going to be the split, because it is Israel's interest to exacerbate as much as possible the Iran connection of this war, so that we and the world are focused on the real enemy. And this is, in this sense, the attempt on Netanyahu's life is an escalation in the war through proxies with Iran. But we do not want a war through proxies with Turkey in any way, shape, or form. So while it is our interest to leverage the war in Gaza through Lebanon all the way to Tehran, it's also our interest on the other side to sever any connection between a war with Hamas in Gaza and a conflict with Turkey, which is in any case simmering in the background. Although I know one of us at least has a theory about this. So why doesn't that one step forward? And
which one of us is that?
Let me check. I have a message on my phone.
Yeah, no, I agree with what you just said. The job of the job of the United States, and this is where I disagree with a lot of the people in the pro-Israel community. who see the increasingly hostile statements about Israel coming from Ankara and the support for Hamas. And they encourage the United States to take punitive steps against Ankara. I see the regional
Turkey.
picture. Yeah, I see Turkey different than they do, and I see it very much the picture very much like the one you just described. The job of the United States is the United States cannot organize the Middle East without Turkey. It cannot. It's just not possible. So or in a state of hostility with Turkey, it has to work with it. So the job of the United States is to work with Israel and Turkey and to separate between the two of them. We are the shock absorber and the buffer to keep those two from being in a state of a conflict or friction. And the real job, our other job is to focus everyone on Tehran. The source of all the major source of our problems in the Middle East is Israel's and the United States is Iran.
Iran. Yeah, Iran.
So Iran. That should always be what's the number one issue on our minds.
And you know, this is for many Israelis. What you say is very encouraging, and if they criticize it, they say that's wishful thinking. Because our nightmare is that one day, Iran and Turkey will join forces against Israel. That's the nightmare scenario because these are the three strong states in the Middle East. Israel they're not all on the same level. Iran is weaker than the other two, but these are the major players. And if there are two against one in this game, that one is doomed. And theoretically, that's true of any combination. If theoretically speaking, if Iran and Israel gang up on Turkey, unlikely on many levels, then it's not then it's an overmatch. And if it's Iran and Turkey against Israel, that's overmatch. And if it's Israel and Turkey against Iran, which is your dream scenario and our dream scenario, not necessarily a direct war, but that's a sort of a new balance in the Middle East that would be more favorable to Israel.
The Turks will not sign up to a conflict with Iran, to being parties to a conflict with Iran, but they will not sign up to being parties with the United States in a conflict with Iran. But they're in competition with Iran everywhere. They're in competition with Iran in the South Caucasus. They're in Syria, in Iraq, all over the place, and they know this. They don't talk about it. It's very interesting. They don't talk about it, but it's deep in the DNA of the Turks. The Turks are geostrategic competitors with Russia and Iran. And this is deep in their DNA. It goes deep in their history. They're not going to be allies with Iran. They'll make sisterly statements and so on. But one of the things that's going on, the United States has sparked without realizing it, Gadi, is a competition between Ankara and Tehran for leadership of the Islamic world. Yeah. It used to the Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia has kind of gotten out of the game. He's pushing a Saudi nationalism now, which doesn't emphasize the Islamic component of the Saudi identity as they did in the past. And there's a kind of vacuum in this religious leadership arena, which ends up being a kind of competition for who's or it expresses itself to a certain extent as a competition over who's the more faithful friend of the Palestinians. This is an old game in the Middle East. Game.
Well, we should remember also the Marmara flotilla, the flotilla that Turkey arranged in order to break the so-called blockade that Israel had on Gaza, which was a major diplomatic debacle, ended up with some strained reconciliation, but tensions have arisen since this war in Gaza began. Mike, I want to continue with the two.
Before we do that, can I make one more statement about this just to make it clear what I'm saying?
Sure.
By not deterring Iran, which is in my view, is the job of the United States, by allowing Iran through its proxy, the Houthis, to shut down international shipping and so on, the United States has, and by defining the conflict in Gaza, the conflict that broke out on October 7th as a Gazan conflict, as a Palestinian-Israeli conflict, rather than an effort by the United States to undermine the American security system, is what it was. The United States has created or fostered a competition for support for the Palestinians. If the United States had openly defined the problem from day one as an Iranian act of aggression and encouraged all of its European and allies and everyone else to line up to deter Iran, there would be a very different dynamic than there is right now. Erdogan at first he was using anti-Israeli rhetoric without taking any actions on Gaza, and he was attacked from the Iranians and then from that component of the domestic Turkish political spectrum that aligns with Iran for inaction, and then he started taking action, and so on. So I really think the U.S. should have framed this differently, and it would have gotten something. It would have gotten a very different outcome. I'm not saying that there isn't going to be friction between the United States and the Turks over Gaza. There's going to be, and the Turks and the Israelis even more. There's going to be, but this can be managed very differently.
The one other thing I wanted to mention in this respect was that Israel, when Biden was here, and everybody fell all over him to hug him, and he quoted the Bible, and he has our back, and all that. The Israelis asked for a joint statement blaming Iran for October 7, and the Americans, you'd be shocked to hear this, Mike, flat out refused.
I did not know that. When did you learn that?
It was actually in the Hebrew press that the Israeli team asked for such a statement, and that the Americans.
I missed that. I need to know. I need that information for my own.
I'll dig it up. But that was the first inkling. You know, at that time, if you remember, people like you and I had a very hard time telling our audiences, our Israeli audience, our American audiences, that the United States is restraining Israel, not backing it in this war, or a mixture of restraining and backing it. Because
I always have problems convincing people of this. This is of course why God put me on this earth, but they don't, particularly the pro-Israel community, they don't want to see it.
Isn't it so obvious now? Isn't it obvious when they're telling Israel, do not attack the nuclear facilities? What could be, when Obama said that the JCPOA is blocking Iran's every path to a nuclear weapon, and everything is on the table, and making noises as if the Americans are going to stop the Iranians. Now the Iranians are very close to a nuclear weapon. Israel has an opportunity to attack. And what is the United States doing? Saying, whatever you do, don't touch their nuclear facilities. How much clearer can it get that the United States...
Don't touch their oil.
That the United States is appeasing and protecting Iran. It should have been clear when they imposed the maritime agreement on Israel. It should have been clear when Amos Hochstein was sent here to save Hezbollah from Israeli attacks. It should have been clear back then, because when Biden delivered his don't speech, he said any state or organization that thinks to take advantage of this situation, I have one word for them: don't. And we read state Iran organization Hezbollah. We did not read state Israel organization IDF, but that is what he meant. And when he was asked,
you and I read it that way. You and I understood it.
We did. And on the plane back, when he was asked whether if Hezbollah attacks Israel, did the United States make a commitment to protect Israel? He said, to join Israel in a war with Hezbollah, he said, I made no such commitment. He was talking standing up with a reporter. It was staged, obviously, but he was talking in this passage in Air Force One, and he made that clear. So it should have been clear back then that the don't is for us, and that the United States is basically protecting the system of proxies that Iran has created around us. And since we've been talking about this, as I don't know, the British say, till we were blue in the mouth, we don't need to belabor this point exactly, just to say that after the don't on Rafah, the weapons embargo, and now the don't, it's one big don't, Mike. I'll tell you what it is. The U.S. policy is don't win. That's its policy.
It is don't win. It is don't win. By the way, I have a dumb mistake. We'll come back to that.
Good. We'll go to our old habits and have a dumb mistake.
We didn't, since this is a special edition. I don't know that you had one, but we will. I have one that directly relates.
I do. Imagine you do.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, good.
but I still want to go over the other arguments in your Wall Street Journal piece that I translated and summed up for. I didn't translate. I made a summary of for Hebrew Twitter readers. So you said, one thing you said, Biden is speaking of negotiations with a Hamas, with a centralized Hamas that no longer exists, and this whole talk of a ceasefire with some leadership is just, you said, outdated. The second thing you said is they are misreading the Lebanon arena, the war between Israel and Hezbollah. How so?
The Israeli government is under enormous pressure, domestic pressure, as you and I have discussed many times here, to secure the northern border. That means to convince Israelis who live there that they will not be subjected to a surprise attack like the October 7th attack, which Hezbollah was clearly preparing, and which would have been much more devastating to the people of the north than the October 7th attack was by Hamas. But also, they don't want to be subjected to rocket and drone attacks. And the attack on Prime Minister Netanyahu's home today shows just how hard it is to suppress those weapons. So this is a huge political imperative that Israel has, which is unlike anything they've ever had before in Lebanon. So the Americans are kind of just operating with the same kind of logic they've had in past conflicts in Lebanon, where they can come in with a proposal and there'll be a ceasefire, and then UNIFIL will do UNIFIL's thing, and the Lebanese armed forces will do its thing, and we'll go back to normal. I don't think that we're going back to normal. The IDF has been chastened by October 7th, but it's also under enormous political pressure of a kind we've never seen before to change the game entirely in South Lebanon. And exactly what that means, I don't know. Obviously, it means there's going to be a buffer zone all along the border so that Hezbollah cannot dig tunnels and come in. But there has to be some system as well that will prevent the launching of ballistic missiles and drones and rockets from Lebanon. I don't know what that system is. I don't know how we achieve it. It's very difficult because these weapons are very hard to suppress, and Israel can't occupy every inch of Lebanon. But until some kind of credible assurance is given to the people of the north, we're not going to see quiet between Israel and Lebanon. And simply announcing a ceasefire on Gaza is not going to deliver that.
And lastly, Iran. That we've basically covered that.
This is the whole thing. It's just that well, you and I have been talking about that. The Biden administration has defined the conflict as a Palestinian-Israeli conflict, when clearly this is centered on Iran. Iran has orchestrated a 7-front conflict with Israel, and all of the elements in the conflict, that's Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran itself, they are all looking to the Iranians for direction, but they're also calculating their political moves on the basis of the military pressure that Iran is putting on Israel. By which I mean to say, Sinwar, the Hamas leadership, they are expecting the regional support to wear down Israel and to improve their negotiating position. So the idea that we can get these separate agreements, that the United States can get a separate agreement between Israel and Hamas without addressing the Iranian element in the equation is also misguided.
All the more so after the hit on Netanyahu's house, which is attributed to Iran. It came from Lebanon, apparently, but now the IRGC has taken command of Hezbollah. Such a move is probably coordinated with Iran. Iran is now signaling that it understood the game. After we are taking the heads of their organizations, they are now targeting Netanyahu himself, and Israel is responding, or the opinion is reinforced that a major price to be exacted from Iran is a necessary move on Israel's behalf, because otherwise we are letting the strategic balance tip against us, and the deterrence that we have, we're letting it be eroded. So if Biden's trying to restrain us now, this is one of the times where, and we've heard Netanyahu say this directly, that there are times when the existential interest of Israel is paramount, is clear, pressing, and then we will not be deterred from doing what we have to do. I want to devote a few minutes to what's happening inside Israel regarding the Sinwar hit, because it's very interesting.
But before you move on, I have a little? I want to report. I got a little insight into the debate at the higher levels of the Israeli government. I won't say how I got that, but it's pretty reliable. And there are two sides to the argument right now. Mm-hmm. One side is saying we have to go all the way. We have to take on all elements of the Iranian axis of evil, and the other side is saying no, the time has come to shut down the whole thing. It's impossible to suppress all of these weapons. It's just a physical impossibility. Iran probably wants to shut this thing down now, and so do we, and so we should look for a ceasefire on all fronts, and those are the lines. Not unlike the discussion that you and I are having right here. That's actually what's happening at the higher levels of the Israeli government.
I'll risk a guess, and that is that the Prime Minister himself belongs to the first school or something close to it. He put out a new statement now saying again that we will pursue this war, this time on a lawn. I think they meant to make it look like the Caesarea home, because he's wearing sunglasses and a t-shirt. Yeah. But he's saying that we'll continue forward full force, and I think that's a strategic necessity. Also, Netanyahu has been preparing for this moment all his life. This is the thing that his whole political career has led to, a confrontation with Iran. I think he had a very frustrating 12 years of the last 16, except the brief interlude with Trump, that he understood that Israel has a very big problem because it can't go it alone with Iran, and it's not going to have the backing of the United States. So his career trajectory led him to a frustrating impasse. And there is now a chance to break it, or at least to make a serious dent in the Iranian plan for regional hegemony, more than a dent, a way to at least postpone it or push it back into the future, maybe a few years, if we can cause enough damage. And that has to be weighed against the damage of the relationship, the damage in the relationship with the United States, of course, American pressure, possibilities. But if we're speaking about the inclination, I would guess that Netanyahu's inclination would definitely be to use this chance in order to bring about a meaningful, long-lasting strategic change.
I actually don't know who's in which school, and I don't know how the individuals line up in terms of the schools, but you're probably right.
So we'll have to wait and see. I think everybody understands that some Israeli response is forthcoming, and that probably the attack on the prime minister's house gave Israel that much more legitimacy to pursue its retaliation in Tehran. Now, I want to get into the local scene a little bit, because it's unbelievable how this country is obsessed with Netanyahu on both sides, but much more so on the left, because if you go now into left feed Israeli Twitter, what is the theme, Mike? What would you say is the theme now?
Okay, wait. I haven't been on Israeli left-wing Twitter. Oh, I think I know. It's that it's going to have something to do with Sinwar. Who's responsible for Sinwar being killed? And how are they going to say that this is not that? How do they take credit from Netanyahu? Because they wanted to stop the war.
Oh, they do. They
wanted to stop the war. And they wanted to stop the war, which would have left Sinwar alive. He wanted to keep it going, and then I got it.
Yeah.
It happened by chance.
Exactly.
So
Bingo. You should get a reward. You should get some prize for this, Mike. This is the theme on Israeli Twitter all day long. It was a coincidence. It was never planned. It's not Netanyahu.
And it had nothing to do with it.
and some of the people on the right are taking the time to answer this. Of course, it's very easy to answer, and the answer is what you said in the beginning. If it was up to you, we wouldn't have entered Rafah. We would never have gotten Sinwar. So of course, it's to the credit of Netanyahu. But no. It's they stumbled on him by coincidence. To which a friend of mine put on Twitter, he said, "Well, if you comb a dog, and the comb brushes against the flea, can you say that combing the dog was not intended to take out the flea?" And that's exactly the right metaphor. And it's not even worth answering. One other aspect is that these are soldiers from rank and file ground army soldiers. They don't belong to, and that has to do with planning and coincidence, right? Because large forces sweep. Commando forces do targeted hits, and so the leftist Kaplan anti-Netanyahu crowd kept taking credit for precision bombing by the IDF. You see, the pilots that you said were threatening Israel to stop the reform. Now you have to thank them, and
because just so everybody understands that the Kaplan anti-Netanyahu, anti-judicial reform, secular element in Israeli society is overrepresented in elite combat units and especially in the Air Force. So the elite combat units have a mix of religious nationalists and secularists, but the secularists are the dominant element.
But Mike, this is a class question too, because the Kaplan protesters who belong to the high-tech sector, the upper middle class, the college educated, and the elite units. There's social stratification here. The elite units, which threaten to use their unique position in the IDF in order to stop the reform, threatening, in the words of one of the leaders of the protest, Shikma Bresler, who said, she said, in September, Netanyahu would not have an army. That was, I think, August. And in October,
Shikma Bresler, who's a professor at the Weizmann Institute, the most prestigious
technology, and also she's from the Israel Valley and from like the old guard of the elite pioneers. So, or at least their offspring. So these guys see themselves as the jewel in our crown, and And so they use that, or some of them did. It's not. It's unjust to blame all of them, but some of them used their position and basically threatened Israel to reduce our security if we don't surrender to their minority opinion about judicial reform. And so now, of course, when the war erupted, all these threats were gone. Everybody came to do their duty in the army. Everyone understood it was a national emergency. But still, the same people now wanted credit for all these special operations. And now it's the lower class, the ground forces of the army who took out Sינוואר. And so when somebody tweeted that, my first response on Twitter was to say, someone said, kudos to the ground forces of Bislach. Kudos to the ground forces of Bislach who caught Sינוואר and hit him. They did a great job. So I tweeted, they also never threatened to neglect Israel's security, to have their political opinions heard. So there was also a class element to this whole thing.
I missed that part of the event. To me, when I read about, I had never heard of Bislach, and then which is the technical training school for infantrymen, and I looked that up, and then and to me it seemed like a movie. I tweeted this, that it was like a movie event, because here are these guys who were not, they have a serious role to play in the military, but they never thought that they would be carrying out the operation to destroy the leader of Hamas, and they just stumbled on it. It's like a picture out of a movie. I missed the class element here, and so you're telling us that in Channel 14, the equivalent of Israel's Fox News, everybody was giggling. Is that were they happy? Were they noting this?
At the time, we didn't know. We didn't know who exactly it was. There are only initial details coming in. But look, there's one side saying it was a coincidence, but also taking pride in the fact that non-coincidence attacks are also not attributed to Netanyahu, because when it's not a coincidence, it's the commandos and the pilots who did it, not Netanyahu. When it is a coincidence, Netanyahu never intended it. And if you look at that picture and then turn around to see what the leaders of the opposition say, then the whole picture changes. Because of course, Yair Lapid wanted to shut down this war. By the way, I saw him on a podcast saying that we should shut down this war because we already won. That was before Sינוואר. And the interviewer, Daniel Dushi, asked him, yeah, but Hamas has not been destroyed. Israelis want the war aims to be completed. He said, well, then we will point at Gaza, show them the devastation, and tell them that we did win. And what about the future? It will create deterrence, because Israel is strongest when it's at its best, and it's at its best when it's a functioning liberal democracy. Hence, Mike, he didn't say that, but everybody will be afraid of us since we defeated judicial reform. That is, so there you have the leader of the opposition, which is, by the way, on polls down from 24 seats to 9, saying we should shut down the war. There was Benny Gantz saying we'll continue the war at some other time in a year or 2 years from now. And they all stood staunchly against the entrance of Rafah, which now you have clips on Israeli YouTube with your
this, of course, is
Ben Kasvit, your favorite journalist, who's saying Rafah is a spin. There's nothing in Rafah that we didn't find elsewhere. This was a time when we were saying we need the Philadelphia corridor, and these guys were saying that's a spin.
Of course, that was a campaign. I don't know if I can say orchestrated from Washington, but certainly the message from Washington and the message from Tom Friedman, which is the same thing, was exactly the same message that Ben Kasvit was pushing. Remember Tom Friedman wrote an article, Rafah or Riyadh. So you have this you have this amazing regional coalition against Iran waiting for you, but it means you have to give up on Rafah. And of course, that was all. We talked that.
Now he's gone completely to the take the win camp. He's not even.
I didn't check it. I didn't check in to see what he said in response to this, but I'm sure that's where he is. Like
he'd
have to have gone through a major conversion, and people at that age don't go through conversions.
So Mike, on this happy note, I think we don't have viewers' responses for this special edition, but you said you do have a mistake.
I do, but before that, I also have a little bit of information about just I did a little digging on the there was the episode of the Americans threatening to withhold arms if Israel didn't increase the humanitarian assistance to Gaza, and they had decreased it. And I think it's worth talking about this a little bit. I did a little bit of digging to find out what happened there, and it's a very interesting story. And I don't think it's been reported. If it has been, I haven't seen it. The Israelis did reduce the supplies to the humanitarian supplies to Gaza, and they did so because the humanitarian supplies to Gaza come in through two channels. One channel is the UN channel, and then there are private distributors of aid as well. But the Israelis found out that the private distributors of aid are paying huge bribes to Hamas. And so Hamas is enriching itself, especially through the non-UN channel. So someone in the Israeli system saw this and said, okay, we have to shut this down. Because so anyway, the idea was, the assumption was that if we shut down the private distributors who are in cahoots with Hamas in one way or another, then the UN channel will increase and supply more aid. And that did not happen. So the Israelis are going back to the old system. The problem with the old system is that it undermines the Israeli goal of destroying Hamas as a political organization. They have destroyed it as a military organization capable of threatening the Gaza periphery. But as long as Hamas is directly involved in the distribution of aid to everyone, and therefore can decide who gets it and who doesn't get it, but can also enrich itself financially from these transactions, it's going to remain the dominant element. So something has to change there. I'm told that the Israelis have some plans to try to begin changing this. I don't know how that's going to work. We need to watch it. But I think it's an interesting dimension of the whole thing, because as I pointed out in the Wall Street Journal article, Gadi, which we can't mention enough here, that I have an article in the Wall Street Journal.
Put a link. We'll put a link under the video for those of you who feel they had enough of it.
Yeah, no. For those of you who are eager for more, okay. The Americans, the Biden administration, long ago accepted Hamas as a continued major political actor in Gaza. They're not, the Israeli goal is to eliminate them as the major political actor. That is not an American policy goal. It's a stated goal. They make this, they have this rhetoric about a revitalized Palestinian Authority taking over. But when you look at what their concrete plans are, it becomes very clear that what they're really talking about is a situation like you have in Lebanon, where you have the facade, the Potemkin Lebanese government, behind which is the real power, Hezbollah. And so what they want to do in Gaza is create the facade Palestinian Authority, behind which is the real power, Hamas. And this is a serious disagreement between the Israelis and the Americans. The Israelis will win in the long run because it's an existential question for them, and they're really serious about destroying Hamas. But in the medium term, there's going to be a lot of friction there. And I have one more point on this, Scotty. I have it on pretty good authority. that and we need to watch this. The Biden administration has some surprises planned for Israel for after the election, and this is whether they win or they don't win. They're gonna give a big kick to Netanyahu, to his groin, as they after the election.
Obama did.
Like Obama did, and in fact, there are two possibilities that they could do both of them. One is to recognize a Palestinian state, and the second is a UN resolution that will call for an immediate cessation of hostilities and a withdrawal of forces, and that will be. We'll have to wait and see what happens there. But I want to alert everyone to this, because I have this on very good authority. I think that this is being discussed. And I made a prediction which did not come true. I hate it when my predictions don't come true. About 6 months ago, that they were gonna recognize the Palestinian state before the election. That didn't come to pass. But they were discussing it back then. The Biden administration, and it's still on their agenda, and they will probably do it after the election.
They might be thinking that it's not good election policy. They might be thinking that they're too fragile with the I don't know, the Jews of Pennsylvania or somewhere to do anything.
Exactly, the Jews of Pennsylvania are a concern, but they will. But like Obama did, they will find a way to give a good kick to Netanyahu before they leave, if they lose the election.
Yeah, I saw Obama looking worried and rolling up his sleeves for the Kamala Harris campaign. But that's another topic for another time. So let's do the dumbest take. What's your dumbest take?
It's not funny, but it's informative. The Ryan Crocker, who is a very distinguished. I'm trying to dig it up here. Foreign Service officer, retired. He was you remember it was Petraeus and Crocker. He was the ambassador to Iraq, but he's a long-time Middle East expert, long career in the Middle East. And they did an interview with him in Politico, which I'm trying to pull up while we're talking here. And maybe this is it. Here it is. It's in Politico, and it's titled, "They've Forgotten Their Own Recent History, Why Israel Won't Move Toward Peace." I just want everyone to read this, Gadi. It's on Politico. In the same way that I wanted everyone a couple of weeks ago to read this Washington Post article where the senior Biden officials were complaining about Netanyahu. I do, because you and I run into people all the time who don't understand the mindset of the national security bureaucracy that is in favor of cutting a deal with Iran and hostile to Israel. And I think that this article does a great job of taking you into the mindset of these people. No one has a better reputation in the system than Ryan Crocker. He is the bubble in the level of the Middle East expertise in the State Department. You know, this is the conventional wisdom of the smart set, and the whole thing is laden with defeatism with regard to our enemies. The notion that Iran and its proxies can be defeated is a silly one. It's a silly one of people who are not experienced. Ryan Crocker, he presents himself as being, overcome with weariness because he's been fighting these fights for so long. And he remembers back when there was Operation Shloma Galil, when Israel was going to, in
1982.
In 1982, Israel was going to bring peace to the Galilee by fighting in Lebanon, and that didn't work, and this one won't work either. And so therefore, military action against Iran and its proxies is always misguided, and instead we should cut deals with them, which means deals, which major concessions by Israel. Underlying it all is an assumption that there's a deal to be had on the Palestinian question that the Israeli right has just prevented Israel from taking. There's just a plum right there ready to pick, but Ben-Gvir and Smotrich won't let us pick that plum. Exactly the same mentality that produced Tom Friedman's "you either have Rafah or Riyadh," and so on. I won't go any further into it. I just want to make one point about what's missing from it. It's not just that they don't think that we can defeat Iran. They in putting forth this idea, they also express the idea that you cannot deter Iran, and that they have totally undermined or forgotten the concept of military deterrence. So there's no sense in reading Crocker that Iran has gotten a lot stronger in the last 4 years because it's flush with cash, because it has all this new weaponry that's very troubling, and that we have to do something about that. Whether it's defeat Iran or not defeat Iran, that's not the question. Something has to be done about this. There's an ongoing contest. Somehow he has this idea that we can end the contest with a
according
two-state
to their
solution.
view, we need to soothe Iran more energetically. We need to calm them down. We need to bribe them in order for them. Someone said here, in order to explain it, I don't remember who I heard it from. He's some Middle Eastern expert. He said, the Obama mentality comes from social organizing in Chicago, where what you do with the neighborhood thug is you hug him. You hug him until he calms down, and you co-opt him to the
co-opt. System. You make them stakeholders.
Yeah, and
that's the whole concept with Iran. You make it a stakeholder. That was the idea of peace with Hamas. You make it a stakeholder, and you make it a manager of the Gazan economy, and you create a revenue stream for it that it becomes addicted to, and then it becomes just a good economic manager, and you don't have a jihadi anymore.
We'll have an opportunity to talk about this at length, since I'm writing a piece about the Conceptia, and this is a major part in the Conceptia. I'll tell you more about this piece after we all calm down from your piece in the Wall Street Journal. I don't want to לערבב שמחות, as we say in Israel. We don't want to confuse different celebrations. So we'll put a link to the Politico article and a link to Mike's Wall Street. Seriously, read that piece, because this is the issue now. Leveraging the Sinwar assassination in order to continue the pressure and win the war, not to make a U-turn and miss the opportunity to what Netanyahu calls total victory, a concept much mocked in the beginning, I guess, by people like the establishment in the State Department right now. So there was also a piece by our friend Lee Smith, about the demise of the concept of victory, in which you have to kill the enemy. Surprise, surprise. So here's my dumb mistake, because as you know, Mike, everybody in Israel, especially on the left, is not so much concerned with Iran. It's just obsessed with Netanyahu. So we talked about not giving him credit for Sinwar, but now his house was hit. And on N12, which is the major mainstream left-wing liberal outlet, on television and they of course have websites and everything else, and they had a headline saying a senior member of the cabinet, Iran just tried to eliminate the prime minister of Israel. And so Eran Etzion, who is a Ralabist, who is Bibi derangement syndrome exemplar, he was the deputy head of the Israeli National Security Council, the Malal. And here's what he writes: signs of dictatorship. The message is that as long as Iran just hits subjects, we're fine with that. But now that it is targeting the supreme leader, now we will get it. So responding to an attempt on the life of the prime minister of Israel, retaliating against that is a sign of dictatorship by the Ralabisti. I think my dumb mistake is actually funny. It's not just ridiculous.
It is funny. It is funny. But help me with the Hebrew. You say relabist rather than relabetist.
You say relabist. Yeah.
Relabist.
Ralab, Bibi derangement syndrome.
I thought it was relabit.
The relabet is, well, there is a Hebrew conjugation which is specific to illnesses. So chatzevet, tzahevet. So relabet it fits into this. But Ralab,
so the Rocklow BB Easts. Okay, I got it.
Exactly.
Ralab
But
is
not everybody knows Hebrew, Mike, unlike what you think. So Ralab is an acronym for Rak Lo Bibi, which is just not Bibi, or only not Bibi. And that apparently infests the whole of the security apparatus, including the deputy head of the Malal, who is happily former deputy head of the Malal and can now speak his mind about the supreme leader and the dictatorship which now opposes the Democratic Republic of Iran in the contest for the future of liberty globally and in the region. And on that happy note, we conclude this special edition. We will be here again with a regular edition on Tuesday night. So
can I make one word about Yahya Sinwar? We didn't talk much about him. And
I don't know. Is it worthwhile?
I want to make one. You know, we were dancing on his grave and everything. We should say one.
Baklawa, Mike. Baklawa.
One serious thing about him. I think he does deserve our respect in one regard, and that's that he died with an open mind.
Thank you for that so somber note at the end of our program. So we thank you for being with us. Oh, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and also like it. We would be here again on Tuesday.